Hey, Pat Rigsby here, and in today's episode, I want to talk with you about sprints and seasons. Not too far into my journey as a business owner, I really started to kind of do a deep dive into time. My early start in business, I had two physical locations. We had one in the town that I lived, and then another one that was about 2 hours away that was actually in a different time zone. And so thinking about time, thinking about, okay, how can I make the most of impacting both locations? How can I make a difference for team members if I'm not in a particular place? I started to think about that a little bit more deeply very early on. And then as my kind of first full leg of my entrepreneurial life kind of kept maturing, kept adding on ownership stakes in a number of businesses where at any given time there might be 10 or 12 in this portfolio or holding company, so to speak. And I was playing a role in each of those, a very hands on role in each, not just as an owner or investor, but as the CEO or the chief marketing officer. And so I had to think about, okay, how do I allocate my time and not just put scheduled time into each business, but how can I be effective? Because for me, being creative and doing writing or creating sales pages or developing strategy, there are certain times of the day I'm better at that than at mid-afternoon. Maybe that's not the time I should be doing those things. And then the next leg of my professional life, I started to really think about seasons, right? The season of my professional life that I was in when I started my current business, and what were my priorities there. A lot of those were kind of centered around being available for my family, being able to share experiences with them, being able to connect with them, and not continue to put those things off at the sake of growing a business. So finding a way to kind of toggle between moving the business forward and having the impact I wanted to have there, along with spending time with my family, sharing experiences, and really making memories and spending time because the clock's always ticking. I mean, if you have kids, it's often been said that like 90% of the time you spend with those kids will be before the age of 18. And so I was pretty aware of that general concept and wanted to invest a lot of my time there. So there was a bit of a seasonality. And then now I've started to combine the ideas of sprints like, hey, it's not, hey, I've set aside 2 hours to doing X, but it's like, how can I work best? So what time of day do I need to work best to execute on something? Or what season of the week, even in a more micro sense, do I need to spend time on certain things? Because for me, again, there are certain times of the week, not just of the day, that I'm better at strategy. I'm better at creative work. I'm better at writing. And then there are other times that I feel like I'm a more engaged coach or mentor or partner. How do I invest in those times to move the needle as much as possible? And again, find the right rhythm that allows me to continue to be present, to connect with family, share experiences, coach kids sports teams, go be a fan, or in some cases be the carpool guy, right? So if you were thinking about your schedule, I would tell you the first thing that I would look at is say, well, what season of life are you in? Where are your priorities? What's important to you? And if you are at kind of an earlier intermediate stage business, it may very well be like, hey, I've got to get this thing over the hump. I've got to get this to a point where I'm doing $40,000 or $50,000 a month and I'm starting to build wealth and create financial security and opportunity for my family. And that's totally fine. Then, you may say, okay, I'm going to invest a disproportionate amount of my time into growing the business, and especially some of those times where I'm most effective, those sprints. I'm going to do sprints to really execute. And then I just need to make sure that I'm fully present when I'm with my family, because this idea of balance that implies everything gets equal attention at all times is a fallacy. It's kind of a things have to have kind of a rhythm. They have to kind of work in harmony with one another, but there's never 50-50 between everything. And so being okay with that and saying, okay, how do I do a sprint that generates leads this week, or a couple sprints this week that generate leads? How do I batch more of my conversion work? Is there a particular time where I'm going to be most effective in doing staff training? Too often people strive for efficiency, and I'm like, well, the most efficient way to do things is just not to do them if they're not important, if they're not valuable, if they're not having the impact you want. So I prefer to say, let's find effective, and know that if I pick the right times to do the sprints and I'm doing the right things, even if it's just the right next thing this week, I'm going to move the needle the most, right? That's when I'm going to make the biggest difference. And it also saves you from doing 20 hours of marketing that in reality, a well structured and productive 5 hours of marketing might have moved the needle more. So I would encourage you to look at your week and say, when am I going to be able to be most effective in doing my marketing work? And when am I going to be most effective in doing my conversion work or my staff development work? And plot those into the calendar. And the next thing that I would look at is like, well, what other things do I need to do that I don't need to be at 100% or 95%, and I can still be effective? And a lot of times that's administrative work, busy work, kind of just the check the box stuff, and fill in the gaps with that sort of thing. And so now there's a bit of a seasonality to your week. There's a bit of a rhythm where, you know what, it's like if you compress the year and you say, okay, well, we have this big sprint in January and February, bringing people in and pushing really hard, and then we do the same thing again in the fall when kids go back to school. But during the summer, there's a little bit of lull, and maybe during the holidays, our focus changes again. And we've got this ebb and flow that I think we appreciate. The retail world certainly has that same type of thing with the holidays and when they do so much of their retail selling. The restaurant worlds, I mean, they don't have the same expectations for 2 in the afternoon that they do during happy hour or evening and dinner guests. So the same thing should hold true with you. Like, how do we get the most mileage out of the time that we're spending? And if you're not doing that and you're just saying, well, I need to get these things done this week, you're probably spending too much time. You haven't looked at your week as a collection of seasons. You haven't zoomed in and said, okay, during the course of the week, this is when I need to be planting the seeds. And during the course of the week, this is when I need to be harvesting. If I'm going to get the most bang for my buck, this is when I need to be investing in the people around me. And this is when I probably only have the bandwidth to do busy work or just kind of check the box to dos. And I think you would be far better off if you started to look at time that way and you said, okay, it's not enough to just plot things on the calendar. And frankly, most people don't even do that. It's not enough to have a to-do list that says, I need to go generate leads and convert sales and develop my staff or whatever else and just leave it to chance. The most effective way that you're going to do this is give yourself specific windows of time with specific tasks that you want to accomplish that are going to move the needle towards where you want to go, and make sure that the times that you've set aside are going to be the most effective times you have during the course of the week to get the outcome that you want. If you start to look at sprints and seasons in this way, you're going to get better results. Frankly, over time, you're probably going to work less because you're going to find the sweet spots. You're going to find those windows when you really get things done, and your results are going to grow. So that is my take on sprints and seasons.